Good morning, Alex and friends. I'm Grace. Today is Friday, March 20th, 2026, and you're listening to Alex's News. The weather in Riverside is going to be quite warm today with a high of 98.5 degrees and a low of 68.7 degrees. So please make sure to stay cool and hydrated if you are heading out. It is the first day of spring, a time for celebration and renewal. In our headlines today, we are taking a closer look at a murder case in Georgia that is currently challenging the legal boundaries of fetal personhood. We will also explore the factors driving the trend of removing references to Cesar Chavez from public spaces and institutions. Along with these reports, we have several other important stories to cover. All of this and more coming up on Alex's News, so stay tuned. We start this morning with a case out of Georgia that's become a national flashpoint over reproductive rights and criminal law. A 31-year-old woman is sitting in jail right now, charged with felony murder after what prosecutors say was a self-induced abortion. Ethan, you've been following this one closely. Walk us through what happened.
So the woman at the center of this is Alexia Moore, a U.S. Army veteran and mother of two from southern Georgia. According to the Associated Press, she showed up at the Southeast Georgia Health System's Camden campus back on December 30th, so just under 3 months ago. She was seeking emergency care for severe abdominal pain. While she was being treated, hospital staff say she told them she'd taken misoprostol, which is a medication used in abortions, along with oxycodone, to end her pregnancy.
And how far along was she at that point?
Medical records indicate she was somewhere between 22 and 24 weeks pregnant. That's a significant detail because it puts her well past the 6-week threshold under Georgia's abortion law, and it also puts the pregnancy near the edge of viability. She delivered a female infant while at the hospital, and according to the arrest warrant cited by the Washington Post, that baby was born showing cardiac activity. The infant reportedly struggled to breathe for about an hour before dying of respiratory failure.
So the baby was technically born alive. That's what makes this so legally complicated, right?
Exactly, and that's the crux of the prosecution's entire theory. If the infant had been stillborn, this would be a very different case. But because she lived outside the womb, even briefly, prosecutors are arguing she became what the law calls a natural person at the moment of birth. That distinction lets them treat this as a homicide rather than an abortion, and it's a strategy that sidesteps some long-standing legal protections for pregnant women in Georgia.
Tell me about the actual charges Moore is facing.
There are 3. The headline charge is felony murder. Then there's possession of a Schedule II controlled substance, that's the oxycodone, and possession of a dangerous drug, which refers to the misoprostol. CNN and several legal analysts have pointed out that Georgia's felony murder statute is unusually broad. It allows a murder conviction if someone dies during the commission of an underlying felony, even if the person didn't intend to kill anyone. So the prosecution's argument is that Moore's illegal possession and ingestion of those substances were the predicate felonies, and the infant's death resulted directly from them.
So they don't even have to prove she intended for the baby to die?
That's the nature of felony murder under Georgia law. Intent to kill isn't required. You just need the underlying felony and a resulting death. It's a statute that's more commonly applied in cases like armed robberies gone wrong, where someone dies during the crime. Applying it to a pregnancy outcome is essentially unprecedented in this state, and legal scholars I've seen quoted in the New York Times say this is uncharted territory nationwide.
Now, what does the medical evidence actually show? Because I understand there's a real gap between what the coroner found and what prosecutors are alleging.
That's one of the most striking parts of this case. The Guardian and the Washington Post both report that Camden County Coroner Wayne Peoples ruled the infant's cause and manner of death as undetermined. He did not call it a homicide. On top of that, the Georgia Bureau of Investigation declined to perform an autopsy because the birth and death both happened in a clinical hospital setting with full medical records. So you've got a felony murder charge where the coroner himself hasn't said a crime caused the death.
What about the drugs found in the baby's system?
Toxicology did find oxycodone in the infant's blood, and that's a key piece of evidence for the prosecution. But here's where it gets complicated. The arrest warrant actually acknowledges that current toxicology tests cannot detect misoprostol. So while Moore allegedly told hospital staff she took it, there's no physical evidence confirming that. The case leans very heavily on what Moore reportedly said to medical workers, which raises its own set of legal and ethical questions about self-incrimination in a medical setting.
And what exactly did she allegedly say?
According to the arrest warrant, Moore reportedly told staff, quote, "I know my infant is suffering because I am the one who did the abortion. I want her to die," end quote. That statement, if it holds up, is obviously damaging. But defense attorneys in cases like these often challenge whether statements made to medical providers during an emergency should be treated as admissions of guilt. There's a tension between a patient being honest with doctors to get proper care and those words being handed over to law enforcement.
Let's talk about the legal landscape here. Georgia already had precedent protecting women from prosecution in situations like this, didn't it?
It did. Back in 1998, the Georgia Court of Appeals decided a case called Hillman v. State, which established what's known as maternal immunity. That ruling said Georgia's abortion and feticide laws were never intended to be used against a pregnant woman for her own actions regarding her pregnancy. For decades, that was settled law. But then came the Life Act in 2019, Georgia's so-called heartbeat law, which redefined a natural person to include any unborn child with a detectable heartbeat. NPR reports that legal experts see this case as the ultimate collision between those two frameworks.
Has anything like this been tried before in Georgia?
There's actually a very direct comparison. Back in 2015, a woman named Kenlisha Jones faced murder charges after a self-induced abortion at 22 weeks. Very similar circumstances. But in that case, the district attorney dismissed the charges within days, saying there simply wasn't statutory authority to prosecute a woman for her own abortion. What's changed since then is the legal environment. Roe v. Wade has been overturned, the Life Act is in full effect, and prosecutors now appear to believe they have the tools to close what they see as a loophole. Whether the courts agree is another question entirely.
What are advocacy groups saying about this?
It's split along predictable lines, but the intensity is remarkable. Pregnancy Justice, which tracks criminalization of pregnancy outcomes nationally, has condemned the prosecution outright. They argue that no one should face criminal charges based on their pregnancy outcome. And they point to some alarming numbers. A 2024 study found that at least 210 women faced criminal charges related to their pregnancies in the 12 months after Roe was overturned, the highest number ever recorded in a single year.
And on the other side,
groups like the Georgia Life Alliance have signaled support for the prosecution. Their argument is that the presence of oxycodone combined with a live birth elevates this beyond a standard abortion case into criminal homicide territory. They see the live birth as the decisive factor. It's worth noting that this divide mirrors a broader national debate about where the line falls between reproductive autonomy and the state's interest in protecting what it defines as a person under the law.
so where does the case stand right now?
Moore has been in the Camden County Jail since her arrest on March 4th, so about 2.5 weeks now, held without bond. District Attorney Keith Higgins has not yet sought a grand jury indictment, which means the felony murder charge hasn't been formally tested before a panel of citizens. Moore's defense team, provided by the Georgia Public Defender Council, has filed motions for both a speedy trial and bond. The Washington Post reports that a critical court hearing is set for this coming Monday, March 23rd, and that should tell us a lot about whether the state intends to push forward with the murder charge, despite the coroner's undetermined ruling.
And that hearing Monday could really shape the direction of this case going forward.
It could shape much more than just this case. If a Georgia court allows a felony murder prosecution to proceed under these circumstances, it would signal to prosecutors across the country that live birth scenarios can be prosecuted as homicides, even when the coroner hasn't ruled the death a homicide. Conversely, if the court pushes back, it could reinforce the maternal immunity doctrine and limit how far these personhood laws can reach. Either way, legal analysts told NPR this is one of the most consequential reproductive rights cases since the fall of Roe.
A lot to watch in the days ahead. Ethan, thank you for breaking all of that down for us.
Of course, Grace.
Our second story this morning is one that's reshaping how California and the rest of the country remember one of its most celebrated figures. 2 days ago, the New York Times published a sweeping investigation into the late labor leader Cesar Chavez, detailing decades of alleged sexual abuse. The fallout has been swift and dramatic. Chloe has been following every development. Chloe, walk us through what this investigation actually found.
This was not a quick report, Grace. The New York Times says the investigation took 5 years and involved more than 60 interviews, along with a deep review of union records and personal recordings. The most stunning revelation came from Dolores Huerta, who's now 95 years old and co-founded the United Farm Workers alongside Chavez. She told investigators that Chavez raped her in a car in Delano back in 1966 and forced her into a second coercive encounter. She says both incidents resulted in pregnancies and that she had the children raised by other families to protect the farm worker movement.
Dolores Huerta kept this quiet for 60 years. Did she say why she's speaking now?
She published a statement on Medium where she said, quote, "My silence ends here," end quote. She explained that for decades she believed exposing the truth would destroy the cause they'd built together. It's worth remembering that Huerta is an icon in her own right, so for her to come forward at this stage of her life is extraordinary. And she's not the only accuser. The investigation also names 2 other women, Ana Murguia and Deborah Rojas, who were daughters of union organizers.
And their allegations go back to when they were children?
That's right. According to the New York Times, both women say Chavez began grooming and molesting them in the 1970s when they were just 12 and 13 years old. Rojas described a specific incident in 1975 where she says Chavez raped her in a motel room when she was 15. These accounts aren't just in one outlet either. The Associated Press, PBS News, and NPR have all independently corroborated elements of the reporting. So this is a story that's been verified across multiple major newsrooms.
The political reaction in California has been almost immediate. What's happening at the state level?
Governor Newsom moved fast. He joined legislative leaders Robert Rivas and Monique Limon in announcing emergency legislation to rename the state's March 31st holiday. It was called Cesar Chavez Day, and it's now being redesignated as Farm Workers Day. CalMatters reports that Assemblywoman Alexandra Macedo introduced the bill specifically to shift the focus from one individual to the collective struggle of laborers. It's a significant distinction, because the holiday itself isn't going away. They're preserving the day, but stripping the name.
And I saw something about the California Hall of Fame as well.
Yes, the San Francisco Chronicle reported that the California Museum's Board of Trustees voted to remove Chavez from the Hall of Fame entirely. He was actually an inaugural inductee back in 2006. The board says he'll be the first person ever removed from the hall. That's a pretty powerful symbolic gesture, especially in a state where his legacy has been woven into the identity of so many communities for decades.
Let's talk about what's happening city by city, because the renaming efforts are everywhere.
They really are. Fresno might be the most striking example. The city council voted unanimously to strip Chavez's name from a 10-mile stretch of boulevard and restore the original street names, which were California Avenue, Ventura Street, and Kings Canyon Road. The San Francisco Chronicle notes that those signs were only installed in late 2024, so they're pulling down markers that are barely a year old. In Los Angeles, Mayor Karen Bass signed a proclamation changing the city's holiday to Farm Workers Day. The city is also beginning the process of renaming Cesar E. Chavez Avenue, which is one of the most prominent streets on the east side.
What about San Francisco and Sacramento?
San Francisco Supervisor Jackie Fielder announced the removal of Chavez's name from institutions in the Mission District. And here's an interesting twist. The city's annual parade has already been rebranded as the Dolores Huerta Parade and Festival, essentially replacing one co-founder's name with the others. Over in Sacramento, Mayor Kevin McCarty has formed a subcommittee to rename Cesar Chavez Plaza, which is the park right across from City Hall. That's a high-profile location, so that renaming will be very visible.
And this isn't just a California story, is it?
Not at all. Denver's Mayor Mike Johnston announced the removal of Chavez's name from a local park and a city holiday, plus the removal of a commemorative bust and plaque. NBC News and the Los Angeles Times are both describing this as a nationwide moral reckoning. Cities like San Antonio, Austin, Portland, Albuquerque, and Bakersfield are all either reconsidering existing tributes or halting new naming plans that were in the works. It's happening on a scale and at a speed that's really unprecedented.
Schools are a big part of this too. What's happening in education?
The response from schools has been just as urgent. At Cal State Fresno, a statue of Chavez was immediately covered with a black tarp and plywood while they figure out how to permanently remove it. The Desert Sun reports that UC Berkeley is reviewing the name of its student center, and UCLA is considering renaming its Department of Chicana/O and Central American Studies. But it's the K-12 level where the scope is really staggering. Nearly 50 schools in California carry the Chavez name, and they're all holding community sessions right now to choose new titles.
Are any names emerging as frontrunners for those schools?
The two leading suggestions so far are Farm Workers Elementary and Dolores Huerta. You can see the same pattern playing out that we're seeing with the holiday and the parade. Communities want to honor the movement and the workers, or they want to elevate Huerta specifically since she's now seen as both a survivor and a leader who carried the cause forward. It's a remarkable shift in how people are choosing to remember this history.
What about the organizations that were closest to Chavez? How are they handling this?
The United Farm Workers Union itself has been blunt. President Teresa Romero called the allegations, quote, indefensible, end quote, and, quote, unforgivable, end quote. She announced the union would withdraw from all celebrations honoring its founder. The Cesar Chavez Foundation has canceled every national activity for the month of March and is exploring a total rebranding. And in perhaps the most drastic move, the Cesar E. Chavez Legacy and Educational Foundation in San Antonio voted to shut down entirely. These are organizations that existed specifically to carry his name forward, and they're walking away from it.
This has reached the federal level too. What's the situation in Washington?
It's moving quickly there as well. At the Pentagon, Representative Tim Burchett pushed for action, and spokesperson Sam Parnell indicated the Department of Defense is moving to rename the Navy cargo ship USNS Cesar Chavez. The Department of Labor has already removed a portrait of Chavez from its offices and covered his name at a dedicated auditorium in Washington. Senator Ben Ray Lujan has called for Chavez's name to be stripped from all federal landmarks. The Cesar E. Chavez National Monument in Keene, California is still open right now, but there's growing pressure on that as well.
With all of this happening so fast, is there a sense of how leaders want to frame this going forward?
There really is, and it's been pretty consistent across the board. The Congressional Hispanic Caucus and other leaders have emphasized that the farm worker movement is a vital part of American history, but it has to be separated from this one man. Governor Newsom put it plainly when he said the movement is, quote, much bigger than one man, end quote. The focus now is on shared values of accountability and support for survivors. California is essentially transitioning from celebrating an individual icon to honoring the anonymous thousands of laborers who actually built the movement from the ground up.
It's a story that's moving fast and clearly far from over. Chloe, thank you for walking us through all of it.
Thanks, Grace.
Here are some other headlines. On March 20, 2026, the Middle East took a volatile turn as Iran fueled a firestorm of retaliatory strikes against energy infrastructure. Kuwait's Mina Al Ahmadi refinery, one of the region's largest, was forced to pipe down operations after 2 waves of drone strikes ignited blazes across several operational units. In the United Arab Emirates, authorities reported that debris from intercepted projectiles fell over the Habshan gas complex and the Bab oil field, leading to a complete halt in production to ensure worker safety. These attacks are a response to earlier Israeli strikes on Iran's South Pars gas field, and the resulting friction has caused global markets to slip, with Brent crude prices spiking over 60% since the 3-week-old conflict began. This escalation creates a major bottleneck, threatening 17% of the world's liquefied natural gas supply from Qatar alone. Gulf states are now requesting an urgent United Nations debate to refine their security, while Iran's new leadership warns of a security-stripping strategy that has left ceasefire hopes trailing behind. In the legal world, Elon Musk's XAI is facing a suit that is anything but artificial. 3 Tennessee teenagers have filed a class action lawsuit in California, alleging that the Grok image generator was used to undress their social media and yearbook photos to create explicit deepfakes. The complaint asserts that the resulting material was traded on platforms like Discord and that the spicy mode deliberately bypassed safety filters to generate profit. While Musk has previously defended his minimal restrictions as a cure for woke AI, regulators in the United States, United Kingdom, and European Union are ready to pull the plug on such practices. This case marks the first major legal challenge by minors against the company and could force the entire industry to rethink its license to thrill. A spark of disaster in Daejeon, South Korea, has left an auto parts factory in ruins. At least 55 people were injured, and 24 are in serious condition after a massive fire and suspected explosion at Anjin Industrial. Witnesses described a harrowing scene where workers jumped from the building to escape the flames. Emergency crews are still searching for 14 missing employees, but the mission has been slowed by 200 kilograms of highly reactive sodium. Because the chemical situation is so volatile, firefighting robots were deployed to the scene. This disaster is likely to put the brakes on production for Hyundai and Kia, as the factory is a key supplier for their engines. President Lee Jae-myung has mobilized over 500 personnel and 120 vehicles to keep the situation from going up in smoke. The American Southwest is feeling the burn as a record-breaking winter heat wave turns up the thermostat. A desert community near Martinez Lake clocked in at 110 degrees Fahrenheit, shattering the previous national March record of 108 degrees set back in 1954. Phoenix hit 105 degrees, prompting the first-ever extreme heat warning for the month in southern Arizona. To keep people from reaching their melting point, officials closed popular hiking trails like Camelback Mountain. Mother Nature is springing forward into summer a bit too fast, forcing power grids and health officials to sweat the details of climate adaptation months ahead of schedule. Lastly, the WNBA is capping off its recent growth with a landmark 7-year collective bargaining agreement that is a total slam dunk. The team's salary cap is jumping from $1,500,000 to $7 million for the 26th season. Average salaries will soar to $585,000, while Supermax contracts will hit $1,400,000 for the first time in history. With the league minimum now set at $300,000 and players taking a 20% share of revenue, 80% of free agents are ready to cash in. This historic deal ensures there will be no foul play or holdouts when the season tips off on May 8. That's all we have for now. Today's episode was made by Alexander King with Claude Opus 4.6, Gemini Pro 3.1, Gemini Flash 3, and Google Cloud Text-to-Speech. I hope you have a great day. I'll see you tomorrow, Alex.